You can find several videos on YouTube with a title somewhat similar to "You Don't Exist," or "You Don't Actually Exist," or "You Kind of Don't Exist." And there are these non-dual teachers who are saying this. We don't actually exist. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Do we exist? What exists? What does it mean to exist? Nothingness, non-self. I've talked about some of these things before, but I thought I would try it from a different angle. We'll see if I'm beating a dead horse or whether there's something new here. But I thought I would start with this idea. You don't exist. Why does this idea appeal to some people? Why are people attracted to this? And there's actually some psychology behind this. And I think the psychology is worth considering. So, the whole idea that you don't exist is that you can come to realize that you don't exist, and then you attain non-existence. You attain some state of pure awareness, infinite awareness, whatever they call it. But you attain some state of mind where you are still here in a physical body, but you're not suffering. So, if this appeals to you, and many people have studied this topic for years or decades, watching non-duality videos, reading books about it, hearing gurus talk about it. If you're interested in this topic, ask yourself, why does this appeal to you? What is it you would like to achieve by switching your sense that you do exist to a sense that you don't exist? How do you hope this is going to change? What is it going to change? The way you look at yourself, the way you experience yourself, the way you experience life? Is it going to change your life experience? Or are you hoping to have no life experience whatsoever? To get to a point where you simply don't exist. There's no you, there's nothing there. So, what I would suggest here is that we are living in a very interesting time. You have probably, if you're into these concepts and ideas, you've probably heard the concept that there are these spiritual ages. Like the last 2,000 years was the age of Pisces. We're moving into the age of Aquarius. Some will say we're already in the age of Aquarius. But nevertheless, there is still a transition time. We are in a kind of a transition time between two of these ages. And what I would like to suggest is that every time we go through one of these transitions between the ages, there's a certain number of people who are meant to be the forerunners for this transition, because each age has certain challenges, certain ideas that humankind needs to grapple with. So every time we transition, there's a certain number of people who are meant to be the forerunners, meaning they are meant to break new ground in consciousness, in awareness. And they are meant to challenge some of the old ideas. In the age of Pisces, there were certain ideas that were valid enough for that time, but they're not going to be valid in the age of Aquarius. So we have to have some people who are willing to challenge these old ideas, to look beyond them, and to embrace new ideas. And one of the ideas that it wasn't clearly defined, but it was lying there in the background during the age of Pisces. And that is that many, many people were fully identified with their lives here on Earth. They identified themselves as human beings. They identified themselves based on their sex, their sexuality, their nationality, their ethnicity, their religion, their profession, all these kind of outer things they were very identified with. And we are meant to break that up in order to move into the age of Aquarius. I'm not saying all people are going to start questioning their identity, but what I'm saying is there is an avant-garde of people who are meant to question their identification with the outer things here on Earth. And I think that's what a lot of people are going through. People who are open to these ideas about non-duality, no self and non-existence, nothingness, they are challenging that identification with Earth, with the earthly life that most people were so trapped in during Pisces. And so in a sense you could say that experimenting with these ideas, considering these ideas, it's a good thing. It has a purpose in terms of breaking up the old. And the reason why I say this is, of course, that I realize, as even science has now proven, that everything is interconnected. And in my worldview, all human beings are interconnected at the level of the mind. So that means if some people raise their level of awareness, it pulls up on the whole. That's why I'm talking about there's an avant-garde. There are people who are the forerunners for considering new ideas. And when a critical mass of people have questioned the old, then it will spread like rings in the water. And more people will be able to question the old. So from that perspective, you can say it's necessary that people are experimenting with this. But what if we step back a little bit and say, what is actually behind this? What is it we are questioning when we question this identification with earthly things? What is it that defines these things that people identified with? Your nationality, for example. You're born in a certain spot on the earth. If you go back 1,000 years on that spot, there was no nation there. There was no national boundaries. There was not even a map where people had drawn a line and said inside of this map is Denmark and outside is something else. So what is national identity? Many people are very identified with this. But what is it? It's a concept. Where does it exist? Well, it really only exists in the mind. Race. Biologists will say there is no justification in our DNA for race. It's a man-made idea created in the mind. It's a concept in the mind. Many other things that we identify with. Your profession. Does that define you? Or is it another concept made in the mind? So what I'm saying is that behind just questioning these, our earthly identity, perhaps some of us are meant to question the mind itself. What the mind is, what it can do, what it can't do. Perhaps that's what we're really questioning when we're questioning this, do we actually exist? Perhaps we are meant to question what is the you that supposedly exists. What do we mean when we say you or I? And so what I'm saying is that I think there are many people today in this transition phase. It is part of our purpose in this lifetime to question these deep things. But we have to be careful that it is constructive for us and not destructive for us. That we don't end up in a sense of that nothing matters, nothing is real, I don't really exist, so it doesn't matter what I do with my life, there is no purpose. And you simply, if you go into this state of mind, very difficult to avoid being depressed. You can see people who have followed these non-dual teachers and ended up feeling depressed and acknowledging that they were depressed. You can see other people who are following non-dual teachers but who haven't come to the point yet where they have acknowledged that they're depressed. They are putting on a facade that, oh, I'm in pure awareness. I'm just in bliss all the time. And perhaps they are for a time, or at least they think they are, and then the bubble bursts and they realize they're not. So I'm just saying here, there is obviously something going on in this entire non-duality phenomenon that isn't necessarily the highest way to deal with this transition, this questioning. So I think it would be constructive, especially if you have acknowledged that there are some issues with this whole non-duality phenomenon, it'll be constructive to question this. Who am I? What is the I I'm talking about? What is the you? And I think we can start by looking at this. There are people that are attracted to the idea that you don't exist because they're tired of existing. They're tired of existence. I met people over the years, and I've had enough experiences that I can understand where they're coming from. I've had certain feelings myself like that. So I get it. But I also see that there's a way to transcend this stage, because it is just a stage. And what I mean with that is that you can actually come to realize that this is not the highest level of awareness. This is a problem you find in many of these non-dual teachers, is that they will claim that what they have is the highest teaching, the highest approach, the highest level of awareness. So in other words, the highest state is to realize you don't exist, you are no self, you've attained no self, you are in pure awareness, you are in bliss all the time, because you don't exist. They claim this is the highest state, and this is what we should strive for. And what I have seen in my 49 years on the spiritual path is that anytime people claim that they have reached the highest, there's a problem. And the problem is, if you think you reached the highest, you're not going to look for something beyond that. And if you don't look for something beyond, you're not going to grow. You're going to stay where you're at, or rather, you're not really going to stay where you're at, because if you look at Earth, you'll see that there's no standstill. Everything is moving, everything is evolving. Just think about what science are telling us. The Earth is not moving in an orbit around the Sun, coming back to the same place after a year, because the Sun is moving. So the Earth is moving in a spiral. Everything in the universe is moving. There is no standstill. But if you think you reach the highest level of awareness, you start going backwards. And that's why people, after a while of feeling they were in bliss, they suddenly realize, oh, my psychology hasn't changed. I still react this way. I still get angry. I still get irritated. I still feel depressed. I actually feel depressed, and so on. So you're either transcending yourself or you're descending. There's really no standing still anywhere. But anyway, why is it that you can come to a point where you feel like you're tired of existing? Where does that feeling reside? Where does it come from? And here's what I've talked about in many of my videos about non-duality and duality, I have explained, we human beings, we're actually spiritual beings in a human body, but we have two basic states of consciousness we can be in. We can see ourselves as connected beings, meaning we have at least some experience. We are connected to something outside our own minds. That we don't know everything. We don't understand everything. Because there's something outside of our minds that knows more than we do. There's a mind that's greater than ours. The other state we can be in is we can go into what I call the illusion that we are separate beings. And the distinction is very, very important. And quite frankly, I hardly see any non-dual teachers talking about this. But it's really, really essential to begin to grasp this. Because when you see yourself as a connected being, you never think you reach the ultimate state. Because you are connected to something that's greater than your mind, a mind that's greater than your mind. And therefore you're always reaching for more understanding, more awareness, more vision. But when you go into this state that you are a separate being, you are now cut off from this sense that there's a mind that's greater than yours, at least beyond earth. You might think that, there's a guru and his mind is greater than mine. But in reality, you are actually thinking that your mind is able to define what's real and unreal, what exists and what doesn't exist. And what I've explained is, in many of my videos about non-duality and duality, I have a whole playlist on non-duality and one on duality. And what I explain is that after a while, you will have explored just about everything you can do in this state of separation. And you're tired of it. You've had enough of it. You simply don't want to do it anymore. But because there's hardly any teaching on earth that talks about this, you don't know what it is you're tired of. You don't know what it is you want to get away from. And that's why you become open to some of these ideas that says, oh, you don't actually exist. And if you just realize that you don't exist, then you won't be suffering anymore. Because being tired of existing is the ultimate suffering. I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm tired of driving a Formula One race car. Well, you can drive another kind of car, or you can do some other activity. You can do bungee jumping, whatever. But when you are tired of existing, where are you going to go? Well, I'll show you where to go, or at least I'll tell you where to go. But you see what I'm saying? I think we are in a transition phase. There are many, many people in embodiment right now who are meant to be forerunners for a shift in awareness. And the shift in awareness is, at a surface level, we stop identifying with all these outer things on earth. Now, mind you, there's a difference here. Okay? So you can say, I go to school. I get a degree as an architect. I am lucky and get some commission to build some famous buildings. And now my whole sense of self-worth and my whole sense of self is identified as being a great architect. But then I get old and nobody pays attention to me anymore. And now, what do? I was so invested in being a great architect that I can't handle not being a great architect anymore. So this is an example of how we can get tired of specific things. We stop identifying with these outer things. And a way out of this dilemma is to say, well, am I really an architect, or am I a spiritual being who has an existence outside of me being an architect? And therefore I can find another way to have a positive life experience by pursuing some other activity. But beyond that, there are some people who are meant to question the mind itself, what we do with the mind, the separate mind. So that's why my question here that I want to throw out is, are you sure you are tired of existing? Or could it be that you are tired of existing as a separate being, of seeing yourself as a separate being? I look at some of these non-dual teachers, and quite frankly, I see in their energy fields this tiredness of existing. But that tiredness of existing can only exist in the separate mind, in the illusion of separation. Because when you see yourself as a connected being, there is ongoing self-transcendence that you never get tired of. It's never ending, at least as long as you're on earth, I can assure you. So what I'm saying is that, and I know I've used this metaphor several times, but what I'm saying is that the idea that we are separate beings, the illusion that we are separate beings, is like putting on these glasses. And now I can't see that I'm actually a connected being. I can't see that everything is interconnected. I'm focused on separateness. And now I have worn these glasses for so long, I've forgotten I put them on. I don't realize that I'm seeing everything is colored by these glasses of separateness. But I have had these for so many lifetimes here on earth. I'm embodied so many times on earth that I've explored just about everything I can think of that you can do as a separate being. And I've had enough of it. I'm tired of it. Because, as I explain in my videos about duality, in order to create the illusion that we're separate beings, we have to use what I call the duality consciousness. And as I say in several of my non-duality videos, the biggest problem with the whole non-duality phenomenon is that non-dual teachers are not looking at duality and the duality consciousness. They think they can create this wonderful concept of non-duality. And that's all they need to look at. But the duality consciousness is what allows you to think you're a separate being. Because it creates two opposite polarities. And it attaches a value judgment. One is good, one is bad, one is right, one is wrong, what is true, what is false. One exists and one does not exist. Always these polar opposites. And that means that anything you create, any sense of self that you create as a separate being, will have an opposition. And you have to struggle to maintain your sense of self against the opposition. And the struggle eventually wears you down. It gets too much, you get tired of it. But if you're not realizing you're wearing the glasses, what happens? What happens is you come to a point where you say, oh, I've had enough of this. I don't want this anymore. There's got to be more to life than this. And now you are looking for a way out, but you don't realize what you are looking for a way out of, namely the duality consciousness, the illusion that you're a separate being. And that means when you look for a way out of duality, you're still wearing the glasses, meaning what you see is going to be colored by duality. And that is why you can come up with this idea that you want to no longer exist, you don't want to no longer be conscious, because you are thinking that it's consciousness that causes suffering. It's the fact that I'm aware that I'm conscious that causes me to suffer. And therefore, I just want to not exist anymore. I want to have no self. I want to be pure awareness. I want to be in bliss all the time. And I can only achieve that by not existing. But you see, there's a very simple fact of life. You have been given existence. And you cannot take it away. You cannot not exist. You can numb your physical body so you're not conscious. But when you leave the body, there's still going to be existence. There's still going to be awareness. You can't take it away. But why would you want to take it away? Why would you want to stop existing? Because, as I said, the reason why you feel existence is suffering is you are wearing these glasses. But you see, in the duality consciousness, there's always two opposite extremes. So one extreme in duality is, I exist, therefore I suffer. The other extreme is, that means if I want to not suffer, I must stop existing. Existence, non-existence. They suddenly become dualistic concepts where there's an opposite. In reality, there's no opposite to existence. You exist. You can never experience non-existence. You cannot experience that you don't exist. You can experience existence because you exist. There's a part of you that's real. So, in duality, it seems existence means suffering. The only way to avoid suffering is to go into non-existence, which is impossible. But there's an alternative to the dualistic view of everything, and that is to realize, oh, duality is just a state of consciousness. It's wearing glasses. I don't have to go into non-existence to stop suffering. I just have to take off the dualistic glasses. I'm still aware. I exist, but I'm not suffering. Is that easy? Is it going to happen just like that? Whoops. No, it's a process. Because it took you many lifetimes to build the sense of a separate self that you have. Why can I say that? Because if you hadn't built a very sophisticated, very complex separate self, you wouldn't be suffering. You wouldn't be suffering so much that you would rather not exist to escape the suffering. See? So what you are trying to escape is not existence. It's the separate self you have created. And where have you created that self? In your own mind. You are actually trying to escape a part of your own mind. You're not trying to escape existence. You are just trying to escape a part of your own mind that has created this very sophisticated separate self that for a long time thought it knew everything and could define how the universe works. But now you have come to a point where you're beginning to doubt that. Because if you knew everything and if you knew how the universe works, you shouldn't be suffering, right? But you are suffering. But you see, here's the deal. These glasses are coloring the way I look at the world. And these glasses are like this separate self that I'm talking about. Some people call it the ego or the shadow, whatever. These glasses have no idea that they are coloring the way I look at life. The glasses cannot become aware, oh, gee, I'm coloring his view of life. Let me just take myself off. No, the glasses cannot do that. But I can become aware. How do I become aware? Well, let's say that these glasses were put on me when I was born. I've never seen the world without the glasses. How can I know that, let's say I'm wearing yellow glasses, how can I know the sky isn't green? Well, because somebody who's not wearing glasses says, you know, the sky is not green, it's actually blue. And that's the function of true gurus. A true guru is one who has taken off the glasses and can therefore say, you know, there is a different way to experience life than experiencing it through the glasses of separation. But it has to be a true guru. It has to be one who has taken off the glasses and not just made himself believe that through the glasses he sees how the world actually works. That's the difference. Because you see, the ultimate outcome of separation is that you come to a state of mind where you think the separate self knows better than God how the universe should work. You think the separate mind can define how the universe works. But since the universe stubbornly refuses to live up to what you define in your mind, you suffer. And when the suffering becomes intense enough and you at least become willing to acknowledge it, you start looking for a way out. But as I said, the way out is not non-existence. The way out is to take off the glasses of a separate existence. Now, it may be that your response to this is, I don't understand a word he's saying. Or it may be that your response is, yeah, I think I understand what he's saying, but he's wrong because of this and this and this. Okay. The difference between whether you grasp what I'm saying or don't grasp what I'm saying is this. If you're still wearing the dualistic glasses, you will not really grasp what I'm saying here. You will not. You may gain some intellectual understanding of it, but that's not the same as grasping what I'm saying. How can you grasp what I just said? You cannot grasp it through the mind that uses concepts, words, ideas, because it is that mind that made you believe that you are a separate being and that you know everything. So how do you grasp what I'm saying? Well, as I said, you can meet somebody who says it's possible to take off the glasses, but you can also have an experience where suddenly the glasses come down, and then after some time, they come on again. But once you acknowledge consciously that the glasses came down, you can't unsee what you saw without the glasses. You may put on the glasses again very quickly, and you may begin to interpret your experience through the filter of the glasses. This is what many people do. Many non-dual teachers actually do this. But if you will hold on to the pure experience that the glasses came down, you can use that to grasp what I'm saying. Because what I'm saying here, what I'm telling you, is not an idea created in the mind. It's experiential. Because I have experienced, as have millions of people, I have experienced that there's a reality beyond my own mind. I have directly experienced that there's a part of me that is beyond this outer mind that thinks in terms of concepts and words and ideas. I've experienced this. And what I'm doing here is, in a sense, trying to do the impossible, because I'm trying to explain in words an experience that is beyond words. It's beyond concepts. It's beyond ideas. I understand that there are non-dual teachers who've had the same experience that I've had. And they are just using different words to try and describe it. They call it pure awareness or infinite awareness or bliss or nothingness or whatever they call it. So I understand. In many cases, we're talking about the same experience, we're just using different words. But the thing is, there are some words that are very risky to use about this experience that I'm talking about. Because you have to realize that if people aren't having the experience, they're still seeing everything through the glasses, then whatever words you are using will be colored by the glasses. And as I said, the separate mind can only think in dualistic terms, where everything must have an opposite. So, you take the concept of no self or non-self. Some build their view of this on Advaita Vedanta, some build it on Buddhism. But you have to realize here that in Advaita Vedanta, which is based on the Vedic tradition, they were talking about no self or non-self. But they were talking about it. They may not have used the same words, but what they were talking about was this separate self. The separate self that sees through these glasses. And they were talking about overcoming that separate self. But that's not the same as having no self at all. They were talking about something called the Atman. So in other words, beyond this separate self that you have is the Atman, which is supposedly a never-changing self, an eternal self, a perfect self. There was one self for everyone. So then later comes the Buddha, who came up, in a Hindu environment. And he said that with all his introspection that he had done, he had never discovered a permanent, unchanging self in himself. He didn't say there was no self. He says the self is constantly changing. That's not the same as saying there's no self. There's no permanent, unchanging self. But he didn't say there was no self. So what is happening is that when people hear about these concepts and they are wearing these glasses, they can only think that here's a self that exists, and no self or nothingness means there's nothing. There's no self. But that's not what either Advaita Vedanta or the Buddhist tradition actually says. They are both talking about what I just called the separate self. And what is the separate self? As I said, it's a self that thinks in terms of concepts and ideas. Now, there's nothing completely wrong with this. I talked about an architect. So, an architect has a vision in his mind of a building. And it's just a vision, it's just an ethereal vision. It might not be totally fleshed out in detail, but he sees the building in his mind. And then in order to get it built, he has to communicate it to other people. And in order to communicate it, he makes a drawing, he describes it with words, he gives specific instructions for how the builders are going to build it. So this is actually what we can call the conceptual mind. You're creating a concept of something you want to build, something you want to create here in the material world. And this is very practical. It's very necessary. So there's nothing wrong with the conceptual mind. But the conceptual mind is only meant to deal with practical, physical things in this world. But what happens is that when we get trapped in the separate mind, everything we experience is created by the conceptual mind. And that means the conceptual mind now takes on a role that it isn't intended to take on. And one of the most obvious examples of this is that we use the conceptual mind to look at what exists here in the physical realm. We project it on what is beyond the physical realm. I've said before that if you look at the Old Testament God, in Genesis it says, let's make man after our own image and likeness. Or in our own image and after our own likeness. But when people are in separation and duality, they are creating a God in the image and likeness of the separate self. They look at what's here on earth. You look at the Old Testament God. The angry, judgmental God in the sky was created by some angry and judgmental men running around in the desert a few thousand years ago. So this is the conceptual mind. When we use the mind that is really designed to help us do practical things here on earth, to project it, we know how the universe works. That's when we get into reinforcing this separate self, making it more and more sophisticated. But since the conceptual mind is using duality, there's always an opposite. Existence and non-existence, true and false, real, unreal. But you see, the alternative to this is you see yourself as a connected being, and you experience there's a reality beyond your mind. And that means you can now see life as a gradual process of raising your awareness so you have a clearer and a broader vision of what's outside your own mind. Whereas in duality, you're completely stuck inside the closed system of your own mind and the collective mind of humankind. It may not be that you're coming up with all the ideas, but you accept certain ideas that are created by other people. Communism, capitalism, Christianity, Islam, non-duality, this or that. All these ideas that are created here in this world by human beings who are using the separate mind to define what they think should be real, instead of simply connecting to something outside their own minds, which gives them an experience. There is something more real outside of my mind than what I have defined inside of my mind. That's the experience I'm talking about. Many people have had it. Many people have had it without being aware of what it is and what is the significance of it. So what I've said before is that in meditation, it's not that difficult, and many people have experienced this, to go into a state where you're not thinking, you're not analyzing, you're not evaluating, you're not judging. You're just aware. You're conscious. There's no concepts in your mind. There's no value judgment in your mind. It's as if your normal state of awareness, where you have all these thoughts and concepts, this is the colored glasses. And when you go into meditation and experience this, you take off the glasses, you can still be experiencing the world, but your experience is not colored by all these concepts and likes and dislikes and opinions and this and that. That experience is an experience that there's something real outside your own mind. Now, many people you can have this experience and not realize that, because there are some people that have the experience, but as soon as the experience is not there anymore, they are back in the glasses, and now they are evaluating the experience based on their glasses, based on whatever belief system they have. So, if you are in a non-dual belief system, for example, you can have the experience that you take off the glasses, you're experiencing this state of pure awareness, whatever you want to call it. But then you put on the glasses again, now you have to explain it. And you might very well experience it as, oh, it was an experience of no self. Why? Because you had an experience that you were outside your normal state of mind that's so identified with the world. And compared to your normal sense of self, the worldly self, the separate self, it will in the beginning feel like there is no particular self compared to what I'm used to. But this is the contrast. The contrast between your normal sense of self as a separate self and going outside of that separate self makes you think, when you get back in and put the glasses on, well, I experienced no self. There was no self. Therefore, I really don't exist. I really don't exist as a separate self. That's what I just experienced. I experienced that I don't exist. And that's why you can formulate this concept in your mind that you should overcome all self. But what was it actually you experienced when you took off the glasses? You experienced something that's beyond the separate self. But it's still a self. It's still a self. Because there was an experience. And if there is an experience, there must be an experiencer. Listen to what I'm saying here. Okay? There's the concept of nothingness. And the conceptual mind will say, well, there's something here, but now my separate self. I'm experiencing the world through the separate self. Now I go into an experience where I don't experience through the separate self. That must mean nothingness. That must mean reality is nothingness. But this is the dualistic mind that thinks, here's something. There must be an opposite to something that's nothing. There is no nothing. There is a no thing. Because in the separate mind, we're using concepts to define everything. Ah, this is a glass. This is a pen. This is a table. These are glasses. This is a nose. These are concepts. When the Buddha talked about nothingness, he meant that in the separate mind we define everything with concepts. But it's possible to experience life without these concepts based on separation, because it's the separation that causes our suffering. Nothingness in the sense that no thing, no concept defined by the mind. That's what the Buddhic concept of nothingness actually means. That you are beyond the separate mind and the concepts defined in that mind. You're not identified with that. But you are still experiencing. And the thing is, you can have this experience. Glasses come down, you put the glasses back on. But then you can have more experiences of this, and they get longer and longer. And when you get more familiar with this, you come to a point where you consciously acknowledge that the experience you are having without the glasses is more real than what you experience with the glasses on. And that can put you into a state of mind where you can now begin to use the experience as a frame of reference for questioning the concepts you have in your separate mind. That's really, in a sense, when the spiritual path begins. And now listen to this, because this is another really important thing that some of these non-dual teachers will deny. This takes time. Why? Well, I've explained in several other videos, but the short answer is, it takes time because you were the one who in past lifetimes, many past lifetimes, created this separate self. You are the only one who can uncreate it. But you have to do it consciously. You have to use your frame of reference of experiencing something beyond the conceptual mind to question a specific concept, so you come to see, oh, this concept, it could be wrong, completely wrong, because it's based on duality. But it could also be that it isn't the complete truth. I'm not saying that everything you see with the glasses on is necessarily wrong, but it isn't the complete understanding of life. And then the third thing is, it doesn't define you. Nothing on earth defines you. But you cannot switch like that from being identified with your outer life on earth to overcoming that identification, because you go crazy. You would go through an identity crisis. And so it has to be a gradual process, and it will take time. I don't care what they talk about. You can awaken instantly. And some people have awakened instantly. No, they haven't. Nobody ever awakened instantly. Now, some people may have a dramatic awakening experience in this lifetime because they have questioned some of their concepts in previous lifetimes. I'm not denying that that can happen, but they still had to do the work before they are ready to have a more dramatic awakening. But even the dramatic awakening that some people are talking about does not mean that they have overcome all the concepts in a separate mind. It just means that they have reached a certain level where they are not as identified with them, but they are still there. Why do I say this? Because if you have overcome all of the concepts related to earth, you can't hold on to a physical body. You ascend from earth. So if you are in a physical body, you still have some unresolved psychology, some illusions that you haven't overcome. I don't care what they say. It is that guru was enlightened. If he had no illusions to overcome, he would not be able to hold on to a physical body. So, go a little bit further. When you begin to really experience that you're not wearing the glasses for more extended periods of time, you will realize that this can lead to a more permanent shift in consciousness. So what I'm saying is, in the beginning, you've been used to wearing the glasses. Your first experience of the glasses come back on very quickly. Gradually, you take the glasses off for longer periods of time. But you're still, when you get the glasses on again, you're still trying to interpret the experience through the glasses, whatever belief system you have, whether it's non-duality or something else. So there comes a point where you can shift and realize that any interpretation is just an interpretation. Anything that can be expressed in words is just an interpretation. It's just a description. And you can realize that you have to be very careful with how you put words on this, because, as I said, the linear mind will always want this to be something ultimate. The ultimate truth. The linear mind, or the conceptual mind, when it's colored by duality, it will always look for something ultimate. As I said, you go into duality, there are always two opposite polarities. So you're defining some thought system, you say, oh, this is real. And whatever is different or opposite is unreal. But you will still not eradicate the opposite, so your belief system will constantly be challenged by other belief systems. I mean, communism, many people saw as the ultimate ideology. It was constantly challenged by the existence of capitalism, and vice versa. And so, you cannot avoid this. But because the separate self, and I explain this more in my videos about duality, the separate self, the ego, has a quest for ultimate security. It's always on a quest to define the ultimate belief system. And that's why when I hear people say that, oh, non-duality, the direct path the direct pointing. This is the ultimate spiritual teaching. I'm always saying, but then you can't have really experienced the state of consciousness beyond duality, or you can't have grasped the significance of this state of consciousness. Because as I said, when you experience that there is a mind that's greater than your own, you realize that your mind, the conceptual mind of words, here on earth, could never define ultimate reality. It can't even grasp it. You can only experience it by expanding your connection, leading to a state of oneness with a mind that's beyond yours and beyond any mind here on earth. And when you begin to experience this, there will come a point where you connect to a mind that's beyond yours. And we can describe it in different ways. But let's just keep it simple and say there is a part of you that exists in a higher energetic realm than this world here, this world of form. There's a part of you that exists up there. And that part has sent an extension of itself to experience the material world from the inside. Your higher self, you can also call it the I am presence, experiences the world from the outside, but it has sent you into, it's kind of like a fiber optic cable with a little camera on the end. It has sent you into the world to experience it from the inside. And that you, I call it the conscious you, but mystics have called it different things over the ages. But that conscious you is real. Because it's an extension of your higher self, and your higher self is real. And there is an entire spiritual realm that is beyond the material world, and it is also real. There are beings in that realm that are real. That's what you can experience. You can't argue for it, you can't prove it with words. But you can come to experience that. You are connecting to minds that are greater than yours. And that's, as I said, that's the ultimate way to overcome this being tired of existence. Because you realize there's ongoing spirals of self-transcendence. It's not circular, like the separate mind that always goes in a circle. And eventually you've gone around the circle so many times that you have had enough of it. It's like this racetrack. It's an oval. And all they do is drive around there and see who can drive around fastest. But there comes a point where you just had so many repetitions of this, you are saying, gosh, this isn't fun anymore. Why am I doing this? And that's what a lot of people are meant to do in this day and age. But it's not going into denying existence. What I'm trying to say here is that when you say you don't exist, it's actually correct and incorrect at the same time. The question is, what you are you talking about? So you can say, the separate self, that sees the self as separate, that is entirely created in the mind, is created in the conceptual mind. It's made out of concepts that have no reality to them. So, yes, that you does not exist. But see, when you're wearing the glasses, you can come to intellectually understand that there's something unreal, because, as I said, you've gone around the racetrack so many times, you realize your mind is just going in circles. So you can come to understand this, that this self is unreal. But then, with the dualistic mind, you are reasoning. That means the opposite of the self that's non-real is no self. Nothingness. It's either real or unreal. But you see, that's from the dualistic viewpoint. In reality, when you take off the glasses, you see that what duality defines as real and what it defines as unreal, they are both unreal. They're both just created in the mind. But there is a reality that wasn't created in the outer mind here on earth. That is the conscious you, as I call it, that can experience itself outside the outer mind, and can, after it has gotten used to this pure awareness, can then connect to the higher self that is above it, and connect to other beings in the spiritual realm, which I call ascended masters. They can also be called different things. But the thing is, this is experiential, not conceptual. And that's why I'm saying, there comes that point where you have to consciously switch and realize what the conceptual mind is. But I don't think you can do this until you've had enough of these experiences that the glasses come down and you experience something beyond the glasses, and you acknowledge consciously that it's more real than what you experience through the glasses. So you see what I'm saying? It is possible that you can have people have a genuine experience that the glasses come down, but then the glasses come up again, and now they start interpreting that experience. They actually start using that experience to validate a conceptual idea created in the mind. It could be non-duality, no self, non-existence, and so forth. So just as a way to trick your linear mind here, just consider this. What does non-existence mean? Here's a person who comes to me and says, "You don't exist." As I said, the first question I would ask is, which you are we talking about? Because if we're talking about the separate self, then I would agree. That you doesn't exist, right? But why is the person telling me this? Why is the person saying you don't exist? Is it not because he has some idea that I can come to realize that I don't exist? Yeah. What I can come to realize that I don't exist. As I said, will the glasses ever realize, oh, I'm coloring Kim's experience right now. I don't want to do that. Let me take myself off. No. But I can come to realize, I'm wearing glasses that are coloring my experience. Let me take them off and see what life is really like. Because the very idea that you don't exist and you can come to realize this implies that there must be a you that does exist, because the separate self that is not real can never come to realize that it's not real, just as an illusion cannot come to realize it's an illusion. There must be something real, a you, an I that is real, for me to come to see that the separate self is not real. Otherwise, the idea, the concepts of real and unreal have no meaning. There's a guru who said, you think you exist, but I realize I don't exist. Yeah, you may realize that your separate self doesn't exist, but what's the I that realizes this? What's the I that says, I realize I don't exist? There's still an I. You can't get around it. If you are conscious, if you are aware, there's an I. Now, what is nothingness? Well, there's nothing there, right? So my point is, that I've used before, is how can we say there's non-existence? There's a state of non-existence. It can only be a concept. The idea that there's existence and opposite of existence is non-existence is a concept created in the conceptual mind, the separate mind. Because, as I said, experiencing that you are more than the separate self, that's an experience. Yes, you can formulate a concept of that also, but when you have the experience, it's not a concept. You're not thinking this, you're not believing it, you're not arguing for or against it. You're just experiencing it. Millions of people have had that experience, if they'll just realize what it actually is they're experiencing. So you can experience that there's more than the outer self. But you could never experience non-existence. That's why I'm saying, here's a person who says, I don't exist, I have no self. Gee, who's talking? Are you not realizing what you're saying? Are you not really grasping this? Can you not see the contradiction? Because if you didn't exist, there'd just be nothing. It's like I once said to my father, we were talking about reincarnation. And he said that I think when we die, there's just nothingness. And I said, okay, maybe so. But if you're right, you'll never know you're right. Because if there's nothingness, you can't be there and say, gee, I was right, there's nothing after we die. Right? Because there's just nothing, you're just gone. But if I was right that there is an existence after we die, then we'll find out, because we'll still be conscious after the body dies. So my point again is, you cannot experience non-existence. You can formulate a concept of non-existence, but it's just like any other concept created in the separate mind. And you're just projecting that you are so superior that you can not only define how the universe works, you can define yourself out of existence. And this brings me to the final idea I want to throw out here. It's perfectly fine that you say this. I don't have a problem with it. You want to have the experience that you are so sophisticated that you can define that you don't exist. That's fine. Because the way I look at Earth is comparable, and I've said this before, to a reality simulator. The purpose of the reality simulator is to give us experiences. We can have two kinds of basic experiences. We can experience itself as a connected being, as a separate being. The whole purpose of having the experience that we're separate beings is to do anything we can think of with a separate mind, until we've gone around that racetrack so many times that we just say, oh my God, I've had enough of this. And as I said in the very beginning, I believe many of the people who are attracted to non-duality, many of the people who are somewhat believing in this idea that we don't exist, it's because they've had enough of what you can do with a separate mind. But the alternative to the separate mind is not no mind or no existence. It is connect to your own higher mind. Connect to the mind that is beyond separation, because that mind does exist. It can be proven by arguments. You cannot prove through these glasses that the wall I'm looking at is white and not purple. But you can take off the glasses, and now it's not a matter of arguing or believing. Yeah, the wall is clearly white, I'm seeing it. I'm experiencing it directly. So, my point for this long talk, as usual, is that I hope you can grasp the difference between an experience created by the separate mind and an experience outside the separate mind. The separate mind, and this is what's missing, it's actually even missing from Eastern philosophy. The separate mind is able to create almost any experience and project upon the experience that it's absolutely real. In other words, the separate mind can create glasses of any color. And when you're wearing the glasses, the separate mind is projecting at you. The sky is green. The wall is purple. There's no other way to look at life than this. You're not wearing glasses. You are seeing life as it really is. Through your non-dual teaching, you have grasped the highest reality of how life is. This is real. That's the whole purpose of the conceptual mind. You can begin to question this, but it really doesn't happen until you've at least had some experiences where the glasses suddenly came down and then came on again and came down and came on again. That's when you can question it. So I would venture to say that if you watch this video, as long as it is, you've already had these experiences. Maybe you haven't consciously acknowledged what they are. They're your frame of reference for questioning the conceptual mind. But you can do that anytime. You can make that switch. You can begin that road of questioning. I've had these experiences, as I said, since I was a child. But my 49 years on the spiritual path since I was 18 has been a constant process of questioning the concepts in my own mind and the concepts in the collective mind that are being projected into my mind constantly. So that has been the spiritual path. And there has been some big leaps on that path, but still it's a constant ongoing process of looking for the next illusion. And once you grasp that, boy, life isn't boring anymore. It's a constant process of discovery and self-transcendence.